Hey there everybody, it's the Digital Portrait Drawing class, and this is Lesson 9, and this is the one where we tackle that most daunting of portrait elements. Yes, this is the one where we learn how to draw hair. So here's where we last left our portrait. We added the mouth in the last lesson, and now we need to fill in what's on top of the head here. We need to give her some hair to work with. Before we begin, I must say that hair is one of the most intimidating elements that you may do when it comes to portrait drawing. It's one of those things that often turns away beginning students, and they just end up wanting to draw bald men every time. But hair really is not that bad once you have a good technique to use. Once you learn how it works and how to go through it, you will not be daunted by it, and it's something that I know you guys can do. I know you can accomplish this, and I'm going to give you the tools and the technique so that you can build your confidence up to draw beautiful heads of hair. Before we start that, I need to give you a brush. A specific Photoshop brush that I made just for this class, just to help you learn how to draw hair. So, how do you get this brush? It's part of the course files. It's called Hairbrush ABR. That is a custom brush file just for Photoshop. And here's how you use it. First, you grab your brush tool, you open up your brush presets panel. Let's pull it over here so that we can see it. Right? And you go to Load Brushes. And from there you navigate to the course files and you grab that hairbrush.abr and hit load. Then way down at the bottom of your list you'll have a new brush called Digital Portrait Hairbrush. So now we got that. Tuck that back away and we'll use that in just a moment. But first we have some other work to do. At this point, you probably know what I'm going to do first. I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to call this layer Hair Shape. On this layer, I'm going to start outlining the shape of the hair. Now, what do I mean by the shape of the hair? Let's take a quick look at our reference photo first. Here she is. Let's take a close look at the way the hair is constructed. Now, if you'll notice that it's assembled in groupings, which I'm going to go ahead and call locks. They're locks of hair. I know a lock is probably less than what I'm referring to it as, but these groups of where several hair stick together and go in the same direction, I'm going to refer to as locks. And you'll notice they form all over the place. They're usually pointed on one end and often at the other end too. They form almost crescent shapes in many of the places. Lots of them have curves in them, but essentially these are the shapes that we are going to outline and we are going to try to mimic and capture in our portrait. We'll go back over to our portrait with the hair shape and we will start mimicking the way those locks are. At this point we're really just going to draw out those lines to try to outline the shapes of those locks in her hair. So here I have the locks all drawn in. Now I did find that I had to go and toggle off that Tighten copy just because it was distracting with just the scribbles that I had in there before, and very loosely and very quickly just outlined all those crescent shapes and the way that they overlap and the way they sort of intersect all together. Now that's just again a structural guide. On top of that, let's create our basic shading layer. Take another look at our reference file. Now is where we're going to notice how there's very deep, dark locks of hair here. And that's what we're going to try to capture with the basic shading. We'll capture the deep, dark ones mostly, but we'll also grab some of these mid-tone ones too. And so our favorite 2B pencil, go in there, and we'll just start creating some nice, dark locks of hair. Okay, so I've captured the pockets of shading that's in her hair. Now, while shading this, make sure that you're following the grain of the hair. Don't cross against the grain to create the shading. Go along with it so that it follows the line of the hair, and it's going to work out a lot better for you. Okay, next we will use that new hairbrush that we just loaded. So we'll use a hairbrush layer. And let's go to our brush presets and go down to the bottom. And this is that new one that we just loaded before, Digital Portrait Hair Brush. Okay, while we have that, I want to explain what this is doing. Now the brush tip itself is nothing more than a series of dots. And I've got the spacing lowered all the way down so that it creates strands of hair sort of interlocking together. I've got the shape dynamics engaged so that the pen pressure is controlling the size, and it's also controlling the opacity. So the harder you push, the larger and darker it is. I've got the brush projection enabled too, so that's going to help sort of make those strands of hair look like they're interlocking. Okay, now also on the tip shape here, it's important to keep this open because you'll want to be able to adjust the angle. If you'll notice how that preview works, the more you adjust the angle, the different look that the brush is going to make. Alright, so enough talking about it. Let's go ahead and see this thing work, right? Alright, so we've got it open. We'll just go ahead and begin drawing out these strands of hair. Again, you want to be filling in those locks that we talked about. And you don't want to be making short strokes like that. You want nice, long, fluid strokes. All right, let's adjust that angle again so we get a nice wide strands of hair. Pay attention to the outline of those locks and try to fill them in with the different textures of hair, the different strands. Like for one lock, go ahead and fill it in with one setting, change the angle setting, and do another one. Okay, take your time with this. Be sure to go through and get each of those locks how you want them to look. Be gentle with it. Don't rush through it. It is somewhat forgiving because it is a pretty decent brush, but again, you want to make sure you're following the grain of the hair. You want to go along with it. You don't want to go against it. You want to just take your time and enjoy the texture of the hair, almost as if you're combing it out with a very, very small comb. All right, at this point, I'm noticing a lot of blank areas in here, and I want to go ahead and shade those in a little bit more. So I'm going to add an additional shading layer. I could combine this with the basic shading one, but I'm just not going to. I'm going to use that big 9B pencil. All right, and then I'm going to use this with a large tip in the very edge of it to really go in and make some darker areas within the hair. This is also the layer and tip that I'm going to use to shade in on her face, the shadow of the hair. Now I don't want to use the whole 100%. Back this down to about 20% or so, and just to give a little bit of just shadow area, because the hair itself will cast a shadow along her face. Be sure we get in the back there, because you're going to want that to be nice and dark. And this is just augmenting the shading that's already there. Okay, things are really starting to come together now. But this next step is my favorite step of doing hair, and it's the one that I think really starts to make it look lifelike and gives a lot more life and believability and realism to it. I'll begin up here with the regular hair brush layer, and I'm going to use that same hair brush but on the eraser tool. Alright, and the thing to notice, it erases and it creates smaller tendrils of hair as it erases in there. And I'm going to use this now. Let's do that rotation thing again. To create the highlight along the hair. Because if you look at our reference photo here, I know we don't see most of the top of her head, but you see the beginning of this streak of highlight from the light as the hair has a natural shine to it. And that shine's going to line up along the head, so the length of the shine goes against the grain of the hair as a whole group, but individual hairs have the shine on it, and it's just the cumulative effect that creates it along there. And we're going to mimic that with our hairbrush here. Alright, now because we have used so many different layers to create this, we'll have to go through and use this on each of those layers. Okay, we've captured that pretty well, and we've also captured the lower type of highlight down here along the side of the head. At this point, I'm going to turn that Titan copy back on because it's got the chin and the ear over in there. But I'm liking the way that highlight turns out. That eraser with the hairbrush tip works really, really well for this. But let's add another effect to make this come out even better. And this is going to be the individual strands. All right, we will use our HB pencil. And we're going to come way down low for a brush size on that. Down to 4, 3 or 4. This one's pretty fun, because here's where we start drawing individual hairs. And we don't want to draw a lot of these. Essentially what this is going to do is just help sell the effect by having individual hairs crossing over and being noticeable. That's also where we're going to draw that little lock of hair hanging down on her face. And we have it all around the outside. We've got these little just tendrils of wispy hair coming out just to help sell this illusion, to give realism to the effect. Alright, and once we get all those in, now we're going to do a little cheat. Now we're going to use the same brush, but we're going to do it with the white. Instead of erasing it, we're actually going to draw in white. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and actually pick that background color, and then use that to do the same idea but over some of the darker areas. Okay, so that looks really pretty good. I like the way that came out. So let's go ahead and group all those together. This is our hair group, and create our merged layer on top and set this to 50%. Okay, and copy that merged layer underneath and run a Gaussian blur on that bottom layer there. That gives us a nice shiny full head of hair. Couple little tricks that I'd like to show you before we finish this off. Let's do something to change the hair color quickly and easily. What I'm going to do is hold down the Control key or the Command key on a Mac, click this bottom hair shape layer because that selects the hair shape, then hold down the Shift key and click on the shading, basic shading, brush, strands, sort of grab all of those into a single selection. Okay, now I'm going to add a levels adjustment layer, and it uses that selection as a mask on that layer. Now this is a lot of fun because just using these sliders we can change the color of her hair. So let's make her blonde. We want the shadows to still be dark, so you want to pull that in a little bit there, but that looks a lot like what a blonde drawing would look like. And then if we go the other way with it, we can turn her into a deep dark brunette, all with just a single adjustment layer. In fact, I want to use this to sort of darken her hair a little bit and leave it about like there. Okay, before we leave this lesson, I want to show you one other trick. Now, if you find that drawing those long locks of hair, even with that brush, is still a challenge, if getting the long fluid strokes is really something that's difficult, let me give you one other technique that's at least worth a try. So I'm going to create a new layer here as normal. I'm going to use my hair brush, I'm going to give it not a solid black, but at least a dark gray color. All right, and now I'm going to create lots of these hair strokes just coming straight down. Sort of fill this out quite a bit here. I'm just going straight down with this. I'm not scribbling with it. And this is a pretty easy technique, or easy brush stroke, because it doesn't really need much control. You're just kind of pulling it straight down as you go. Now let's take this layer and hit Control or Command T to move it into place. Now before you complete the transformation of this, right-click on it and select Warp. And then you can use these warp handles to give a nice curve to that. And you can really get some great effects with this without having to try to draw those intricate curving lines. Now again, this will still take some work if you plan to fill the entire head with this technique, but you may find it a little less frustrating than attempting to get the strokes to follow your hand properly with the tablet. Or maybe you want to combine both effects. It's completely up to you, but this is a legitimate technique that I wanted to show you because it is something that may be handy to you. Alright everybody, that brings us to an end to lesson 9. Congratulations, you made it through the hair lesson. So I hope that's a useful technique. I hope it's something that you can make good use of, so in your own portraits you can draw big, beautiful, gorgeous, flowing locks of hair. Be sure to catch the next one where we will finish up this portrait and then we will move on to the profile.